Tom and Mark. What was their relationship like in the studio? How are they together?
If I think back, I feel like Mark was completely ready at that point, even though he was 17, 18. Like I felt like when he was in front of the mic, he had the composure he needed. I felt like Tom was maybe just a little bit more of the understudy at that point, but I don't mean that in a negative way, right? Like Tom's songs are good. One of the things that I'm like most amazed with Tom about and very proud of what he's done is the Angels and Airwaves material. I love those records. I think they're fantastic, and I think they have tons of imagination. To know that he's made those records after meeting him as a kid and making that punk rock record together, that's a pretty huge deal, man. And I think it shows how much scope Tom has here, you know? I think he's a very gifted man. I think Mark is very gifted as well. I think at that point, Mark was maybe just a little bit more comfortable on his instrument. Tom was maybe a little less proficient with his instrument. And he, behind the microphone, maybe didn't have all of the composure that Mark had at the time. But you had to give the guy an A for effort. Like, he wanted to make a record. You know? And I think that he realized that, like they always say, when you join a band with other guys who are just a little bit better than you. And I felt like maybe Tom was in that spot where maybe mentor's a strong word. Maybe they're just like school chums, you know?
Yeah.
But I think maybe he felt like he had an anchor there with Mark. And I think that clearly, as they developed as songwriters and producers in their own right, that there was a network of support there between the two of them, you know? And that was probably pretty helpful. And I think there was also competition there as far as writing goes. And I think if you look at like a band like Husker Du, where Bob Mould and Grant Hart were co-writers, and you'd pretty much have equal amounts of each writer's songs on a record. I'm sure that there was, I can't speak to that, but I'm sure, knowing as an artist myself, I'm sure that there was a little bit of that competition there too, which probably was a good thing in pushing their writing and growing their sound, you know?
Yeah.
But also, like, it can't be overlooked that, like, that sophomoric, you know, humor and that attitude that they probably took with them out of high school, right? That they never really lost that, and they kept part of that. They realized that was super, super important. It was almost more important than just what the band sounds like. It's like, maybe they only have one joke, but it's a good joke.
Yeah, well, Blink is definitely, you know, known for their antics as much as it is with, you know, the music.
Absolutely, right? And that's a big part of why kids love that band. Because they were entertaining. Because it's a party and you're all invited. You know, we're not here to tell you something. And that is part of the secret of that kind of success, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but I read a funny quote from Tom a little while back, and he essentially said, yeah, we started a revolution. It was a pretty stupid revolution, but it was a revolution nonetheless.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's a spot-on comment.
Tom typically sings at a higher register than Mark. So when you were recording the band, did you have to set up the mics in a different fashion or anything different?
Yeah, I probably actually set up one for each of them. I probably put whatever sounded good in front of Tom, and I probably put whatever sounded good in front of Mark. And I think if I recall, I might have used a U67 for Mark, and I might have used a C12A for Tom.
I guess this is just more of a subjective question for you personally. Did you prefer, you know, the songs that Tom was vocalist on or that Mark was the vocalist on?
Probably Mark, just because he's got a little bit more tone. I mean, they both melodically kind of sing the same way, you know? Those songs, the melodies only really ever have 3 or 4 notes. And you're just kind of bouncing around between those. I think with Tom, he's like, if you just look at his physical makeup, right, he's a little thinner, he's a little slimmer, he's a little slighter. And so it's kind of hard to get that kind of tone out of your body. Mark is sort of a bigger guy with sort of more of a chest to him. So he's going to sound a little broader. But what I would remark about that is just touching on that Angels and Airwaves thing again. Like, if I listen to those Angel and Airwaves records, like, I think his voice is perfectly suited to those songs. like every single one. Like it never sounds too edgy, and sometimes he is kind of belty, but man, it sits really, really good. So I think they're both terrific singers in their own right. I don't think that's something that they were born naturally with. I think it's something they both had to work at to get to.
So when you were in studio with Mark and with Tom, did you ever get that vibe that there was kind of a friendly rivalry between the two guys?
I don't know that there was enough time for me to discern that. Like when I was speaking of what that maybe what helped that relationship, I was kind of speaking more from my personal experience than trying to extrapolate from their interactions. I kind of just seem to recall it also just kind of being like sort of back and forth. Okay, I'll sing a couple songs now. Okay, you got yours. I'll do a couple now, kind of thing. Like it was just very back and forth. It was very workmanship, because of the allotted time. And so maybe there wasn't that much time to explore those nuances, right? But you're also striking when the iron's hot and you're kind of bottling lightning when you're doing that. And that's where some of that energy came from, and keeping it moving along. So there isn't too much time to think about it.
When Tom left the band, was that surprising at all to you?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I think that what they had done was kind of worked out a formula that worked really well for them. So kind of to abandon that to me seemed like rash. Like maybe you could take a break and come back to it or something. But again, like I don't know the background there. So I can't speak to what anybody's, motivations, what might have been. I was actually more surprised that they got somebody else in to play in the band. Like to get Skiba in to play in the band. That actually surprised me more. I thought the thing to do was, okay, well, you just play Mark songs.
Oh, I got what you're saying. Okay.
Get a guitar player and just play Mark songs. So it was actually more of a surprise for them to do. Like, I don't know how it works with Skiba. Does Skiba play Tom songs?
I've seen him once with Skiba, and I think they did. Yeah, it was back in 2014, so this was also a while ago. But yeah, I do remember. I think they played a couple of the songs where you would have Tom's vocals. So yeah, I do think he was involved with that. Yeah.
Okay, so like maybe what they're doing is playing Mark's songs, and then Mark's songs that have secondary Tom parts or trade-off parts.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you definitively if they play only songs that had Tom vocals.
Right. And so you could see why I sort of thought that could have been an approach, right? Just hire Dude X as the guitar player, keep all the focus on Mark. But bringing Skiba in, you're bringing in another punk rock star. I think I'm comfortable in saying that. He's got a terrific band and writes great songs in his own right. And so it's a whole different dynamic. And I think that's the thing that surprised me the most.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of relationship with Matt Skiba?
I don't know. But I have met him. Because for about 5 minutes, I was running a bar business that I was involved in LA. And he came by a couple of times, and I never remembered him. So every time somebody came by, they had to go, "Oh, that's Matt Skiba." And then Matt would go, "Oh, Steve, I remember you. We met before." I'm like, "Oh, Matt, cool, yeah. I didn't remember meeting you last time," or something, or what you looked like. I didn't remember what he looked like, or something like that. But I actually have met Matt Skiba a couple of times, and he's a sweet guy.
That's cool, yeah. And there are rumors that Tom might rejoin Blink at some point. Do you think that's a natural thing that should happen, or is that done?
Oh, I mean, I think that'll probably happen at some point. Maybe not now, maybe 10 years down the road, The guys are they're still young, so, they could do it, they could do that dash for cash right at the end, and you know what? They have great fans and people that love them and support them. People will come out and see some shows even when they're in their 50s, or their 60s.
Yeah. The question is, would Matt still be in the band if Tom comes back, or does he have to leave?
Oh, I think he probably has to leave. I think that's probably how that goes down.
And so when Blink ended for the first time, were you surprised at all by that?
Maybe a little bit, just because they had kind of taken it and sort of turned it into their own little cottage industry. And so when you've got something that's working that well, you tend to not disrupt. And so maybe it was a little bit surprising in that sense, But who's to know what goes on over years and years of touring and working together and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? It's just, unless you're a fly on the wall, you can't put those pieces together.
When you recorded Blink those first 3 days, you were the only person in the studio with them, right?
Yeah. No, I don't even recall if anybody came by.
When the band showed up, like, what was that like? Like, they just showed up and they just kind of rushed the gear out of their van. Like, how was that arrival?
You know, the band arrival is always a thing, right? Like, if you don't know them before, they didn't look like they had gotten much sleep the night before. They definitely looked a little scruffy. You know, and I'd maybe only spoken with them a day or two. I think I might have spoken with Mark on the phone just to advance, you know, to say, I'm coming. This is what we're bringing. Like, I had I believe a one conversation, you know, like they were calling to confirm the time was still booked or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I gotcha.
And so, you know, they weren't in the business of making records, right, at that point of their lives. So it was a situation of like, okay, guys, well, we got a lot to do. So let's just try and get in, hit the ground running. We had 3 days. And the guy showed up Friday at noon. And I was there already, put on some coffee, was getting the place ready to go, setting up some microphones, trying to get us ahead of the ball a little bit. And so the guy showed up. And the first thing that I was sort of looking at, that was kind of like, ooh, like their gear doesn't look that good. The first thing I was just sort of a little taken back, because I could see they didn't have much gear, and West Beach didn't have any gear. They really didn't have any back line to speak of. You know, the studio didn't have a drum kit. It didn't have guitar amps, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of looking and going, okay, well, we'll just see what we got going on. So I said, well, guys, what do we got to get done this weekend? And they look at me and they go, we got to record and mix 17 songs. And I was just sort of like, what?
Yeah.
And from what I understand, they also showed up like 3 hours late, right?
They may have. I don't recall the exact timing, but that is possible. That is possible. I know I was early because it was one of the very first sessions I did at West Beach. And so I didn't know the studio that well, and I wanted to make sure that I was prepared, you know, and comfortable, and I was kind of getting us ahead of the game a little bit. So I was sort of able to get them in and get going, but like then you're sort of confronted with, okay, well, how do you record and mix 17 songs in 3 days? Like, I'm not really sure how you do that. So we just kind of started recording. I guess one thing about it was the short songs were short. So that kind of made it easier to focus on kind of trying to get a performance together where they could get through the tune. Everybody was sort of, as I recall, everybody was pretty decent with their instruments, you know. Nobody was super flailing. And we'd get through a take or two and you would go, you could probably do it better, you know. Or we listen to it and go, you know, maybe try and tighten this part up here a little bit, you know. But we were trying to get good takes down, you know. And at one point I told the guys, like after the first day or something, I said, you know, I know Eric that runs Cargo. I said, I can call him and tell him sort of where we're at and just see if we can get one more day. Because at least if we had another, you know, 12 or 14 hours, you know, we could do some more overdubs or we could kind of get more out of this, you know, because it was so much to do in so little time. And I sort of realized that unless we sort of pulled off a miracle, I knew that the guys weren't going to come out of it with a finished record that weekend. You know, we could do our best to do it, but so I started scrounging around the studio. We got drums in place and bass, and I think we probably kept some of the bass off the floor and kind of punched in, you know. I don't know that we went back and did like big sections of overdubbing bass, but guitar, all we had was this, the band had brought like this sort of cheesy Fender, solid state head and a cabinet. There just was not much tone to it, you know? And I don't know that we had much in the way of guitars either. You know, I had just moved to LA, so I hadn't brought all my gear down yet. And, you know, basically Cargo had sort of, in a way, kind of set them up to fail, you know? Like, they didn't budget for any rental gear. They didn't give them enough time to do the songs justice and focus. And the thing was, the songs are really good. Like, all the songs were really good. Like, I could tell right off the bat as the guys were jamming through them, like, hey, we have something here. You know, this could really be something. And the songs were funny, you know? They had a sense of humor to them. They didn't take themselves too seriously. Like I was talking about Guttermouth, same sort of thing. I was like, that's cool, you know?
So you think that Cargo didn't want to have them sign? Like, they didn't want them to succeed?
No, I think that they wanted them to, you know, get a record out. But I just think that they were hoping that they could do it for the bare minimum.
Gotcha.
And that, you know, whatever it was, that would be good enough, you know? But the thing was that punk rock was really changing at that point. And it was starting to really break open. It was starting to be played on the radio. So all of a sudden, like, punk rock records sort of had to sound good. And you couldn't get away just like throwing something on tape and going, oh, it's the feel, it's the charm. Like, that wasn't flying anymore. The goal was to sell lots of records. Yeah. You know, just like any other business, be good at your business, right? And so I think Cargo just figured, well, we'll just throw this against the wall and see what happens, you know? So, you know, over the course of the 3-day weekend, we fought to try and get something going as best we could. And I scrounged around the place. I actually found a Marshall. And I'm like, okay, well, this is something. We could plug that into something. And didn't really have any pedals. And it was like an older Plexi, so those run very clean. You know, it's a very loud amp, but it's very clean. It's not a gainy amp. And that helped actually sort of build part of what we had as the guitar sound. We kind of used some of that Marshall as a clean tone and then took the Fender, which was a grainier kind of, you know, more distorted, more gainy tone, and then kind of rigged up the two amps and blended them together. Blended the two cabinets and the two amps with a couple of mics together. That was just sort of enough to get it to the place where, like, it didn't sound, like, it sounded like a guitar.
Yeah, I get you, yeah.
Sounded like a guitar in a punk rock band. It didn't sound like a too clean classic rock sound, and it didn't sound like a blown out metal sound. It kind of sounded like something that, well, you could maybe hang your hat off of that. Maybe if you know, doubled it up or did something else to it and, you know, maybe worked on it to spread it in the mix or something, but it was something, you know? And that's sort of like what making that record from my end, the tracks that I worked on and the work that I did on it, that was sort of what making that record was about. Just with scotch tape and baling wire, right? Like, pull together whatever you could to get, you know, something on tape that sounded good. Fortunately, I think, you know, I was talking about the songs were good, the melodies were good, the lyrics were good, they were funny. Like, just having that as the centerpiece to a lot of the songs, I think helps pull that record off.
Yeah, I hear you.
And you know, it's not a highly technical record, you know? It's a punk rock record, you know?
Yeah.
From what I understand, you guys, I think after the first 3 days, from what I've read, I'm not sure if this is correct, you guys did some overdubs after the fact, like at another time. Is this true?
Yes. So, but I wasn't involved in those sessions, okay? I had tried to get in touch with Eric down at Cargo and said, well, is there something else we can do? And I guess they just went back and forth, and they were like, we're going to do a little bit more recording, but we're going to do it in San Diego. And so they used a local engineer, a guy that went by the name of O, like the letter O. And he was able to get the guys back into the studio for a couple days and sweeten up the guitars a little bit, tighten things up. I think they were able to do a little bit more vocals here and there too. And then get a mix of that, which sounded like a more complete idea, you know? So basically what they probably kept was all the stuff that we did, the drums, the bass, the guitars, then added some additional guitars on top of it. They clearly somehow got their hands on another guitar rig or maybe another guitar or something that sounded a little bit better. And then beefed that up and got some mixes from that. And so that's how the production ended, you know? Like, I did do the mixes that we were supposed to do. They asked us to turn in mixes, so we did turn in mixes. You know, and of course those never got used. And I don't know to this day where those are. There's a reel of them somewhere.
You gotta find those,
gathering dust somewhere. That might be kind of funny to listen to.
Yeah, you have to find those. That'd be hilarious.
But then I didn't hear a lot about the record or the band after that. Like, it just kind of went away. And West Beach was kind of picking up business. We were working on that Punk and Drublick record. And because of that, we were getting more bookings. So all of a sudden, like, a lot was going on, and I was working on a lot of different sessions. And then one day, I'm with a friend and we're driving down Melrose. I think we're going to go get some lunch or something. And so we're driving down Melrose, actually just a couple of blocks away from West Beach, from the studio where we track that stuff. And a car pulls up beside us and their windows are down and they're playing a record and it sounds, vaguely punk rock. And I'm sort of listening as both cars are sitting at the light. I'm going, that sounds familiar. Like, I know that song. That's so weird. And so we lean over and we go, what are you listening to? Who is that? And the girl in the car leans over and she goes, it's Blink. We love them.
That's awesome, man. Was it the record you worked on?
Yeah, it was that record. And so I had remembered the song from whatever song was playing in their car. I remembered, maybe it was M+Ms or something. And I remembered the song from the session because it was a good song and it stuck in my head, but it was just so random that the next interaction with that song was like on two cars sitting on Melrose. Like, you'd think, oh, well, we mailed them a copy of the record because they worked on it or something. I didn't really hear anything, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's out. Okay. And then it started actually kind of taking off and K-Rock started playing it, which was bizarre because even the refined, version of how that record was mixed at the end, it's still a pretty edgy sounding record, and it's not, those aren't real, what you'd call radio mixes, but you slap radio compression on it and turn it up, it sounds okay. And they still play a cut or two off that record on K-Rock every once in a while. They'll play it like on Labor Day weekend, Yeah. Oh, Blast from the Past, Blink-182 and M+Ms, they do play it every once in a while. But it was pretty crazy when it kind of started getting more play on the radio, and you'd turn on the radio and hear the song that you worked on every once in a while. Their band just took off after that. They signed a major deal. And they were putting out record touring, putting out a record touring, putting out a record touring, they were nonstop for 10 years after that.
Were you surprised to see them explode like that?
Maybe a little bit. Not because I didn't think that they had talent. There was no doubt that I realized that Mark had it in spades after working 5 minutes with him. I knew he had it. But it was more just because the songs that we worked on were kind of locker room or jocular in a lot of ways, that I thought, oh, I don't know, do chicks listen to this in their car, right? Apparently they do. Do guys who drive pickup trucks listen to this song? Apparently they do. And you need girls to buy your record, and you need guys that drive pickup trucks to buy your record if you want to sell millions of records. You literally, you have to, you've got to really appeal to a very broad base of listenership. And strangely, that record has worked in that respect. And it continues to sell. I think the last time I checked, it sold 400 or 450,000 copies now, something like that.
That's awesome.
So who knows?
Hey, congratulations for having worked on that. That's really cool.
Who knows? It may go gold one day.
I'm sure it would. Eventually over the course of time.
Eventually. But it was a good project to be involved in. It was a good experience because it was an experience in adversity, in trying to get something happen so quickly, right? And I'm just glad that the core of what we built was able to serve, and the work that O was able to do later was to bring it to fruition. I always like to say a good idea is a developed idea. And I think at least that we built the bedrock for it so that they were able to sweeten it and then go, you know what? This is going to work. Let's get it out there, And it did. It totally did.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations on having accomplished that.
Thanks.
So I guess in comparison to Mark and Tom, how was Scott in studio? Because he wasn't really one of the leaders of the band, right? How was he as a person?
I don't recall him being in a leadership mode, I just recall him okay, Scott knows the songs. He's going to bang them out. Let's start on them, I'm sure we were making a few small changes on the fly. But we were probably also trying to stick to the playbook pretty close so that we didn't get too out there and kind of get lost, you know?
And you were saying technically he was still like a decent drummer?
Yeah, I felt that he was decent. You know, I've heard other people, you know, talk about his work in a less complimentary way, but I don't feel that Scott was incompetent. I feel that he was a decent punk rock drummer, and we were able to nail the songs down with him behind the kit and move on. I thought he did a good job, you know? And I recall him being, more on the quiet side. I recall him taking input where we had it for him as far as, you know, trying to get through parts or figure stuff out. You know, he wasn't fighting anybody on anything. You know, he was a team player.
Would you happen, I mean, there's a lot of conflicting information online. Would you happen to know why he, you know, was no longer a part of Blink-182?
I honestly don't. And that's just because that after that record was done, we were both sort of on our separate busy paths. And I probably hadn't have even found out about it until I looked at one of the later records and seen that Travis was now, you know, the guy.
Were you just on a personal level surprised at all when Scott was no longer with the band?
Not, maybe a little, like in the sense that that the three guys really kind of seemed to come from the same place. You know, like they seemed like a unit to me, the three of them. Like, you know, personally. And so maybe in that respect, I thought, oh, it's kind of odd, you know, because they seem tight and they seem close and they seem to have something going. But I'm not, you know, privy to any information as far as how those decisions were made or what that's about. So that's about as much as I can honestly speak to it about. Scott was great. He applied himself and he worked hard and he wanted the best for his performances. And we really did try and get, you know, he didn't have a terrific kit. We got squeezed the best out of it that we could. I seem to recall him just after being done, sort of being relieved that he was done and just kind of kicking on the couch and letting the other guys do their thing. You know, he didn't interject too much. And you know, sort of once he was done, he was done.
So you did the drum parts first and then everything else afterwards?
Yeah, I think what we did was we recorded the songs like live off the floor. I don't think we were working with a click track. I just think that they played the songs. I might have like punched in a click track at the top of the song just to count off or something, you know, so they had a tempo to start at or a reference and then had them play it. And then we probably like patched bass here and there and then went back and kind of tried to figure out what our guitar sound was going to be. Probably patched guitar on the Fender track. And then started a new track with the Fender and the Marshall kind of blended together where we had more of a tone. And then doubled all the rhythm parts. Probably just put a few octave parts in here and there, you know, small overdub parts.
So you guys didn't do any like just singular drum recording? The drumming was part of, I guess, the live ensemble?
Yeah, it would have been part of the live performance. Just because of the time constraints that we were dealing with. Like at that era, recording to tape on a record with a budget, I would have a click track set up, printing that to tape. We'd already have a scratch guitar and a scratch vocal on tape, and the drummer would be playing by himself to scratch guitar, click, and a vocal. And then I would build the band around, or you know, it's still sort of my method, and then I'd build the band around that.
You guys had such a compressed time. Did you have any time for, you know, any of those classic Blink shenanigans, or did you guys have to just kind of work?
Yeah, no, I don't think that there wasn't a lot of downtime for shenanigans, you know. Probably would have been a good thing if there were. I just remember for the most part it just being like a very intense working experience.
Were you familiar with the songs before you started recording them that day?
No, not at all. There was no pre-production, you know, and pre-production is one of my big tools, and it's something that I like to spend time on.
You know, you mentioned that you found the songs humorous. When you were recording them kind of carte blanche and you didn't really know them before, and you were just hearing them sing the lyrics, were you ever like laughing in the studio?
Oh, no. I mean, there was times where I was almost falling out of my chair. I'm literally serious. I can remember even one, maybe it was Benoit Balls or something. And I said, Mark, this song is so good, dude. And it's so funny. I said, I think I'm going to kind of like, since I moved to LA, I kind of want to start playing and put a band together. And I remember telling myself, I'm going to cover that song because I love that tune. You know, so I was, as in my recollection, being very supportive of what they were doing and very encouraging of what they were doing. I recall being caught up in the spirit of it, in the humor of it, and it's at times just the joy of it, you know?
Yeah.
And then there was, the tracking part was probably like the most relaxed, fun part. The part where you have to come in on a Sunday and mix 17 songs, that was probably not the fun part. This is days like, this is before like you burn a CD, right? This is like you have to take the mix, dump the mix onto a cassette, take the mix on the cassette to the car, listen to it in the car, bring it back, make the adjustments, dump the mix to the cassette again, go to the car again. Like that's how we mixed records then.
That's nuts. You know, it's funny. I was talking with Jack Endino, Nirvana's original producer, a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, you know, a similar thing. First time he recorded Nirvana, he basically had 5 hours to mix like 10 songs. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy what you guys have to do sometimes.
Well, the thing is, though, too, like, but I had worked with some good mixers up in Canada, and I had sort of seen a couple of guys basically pull that feat off, you know, with maybe a little bit of extra preparation. So I wasn't afraid of it. I was more afraid of not being consistent between the mixes, like getting too far off center of how a mix sounded, you know? And I think back then we were mixing for consistency between songs on a record. We wanted it to sound like one thread, one record. Not like modern records where you throw everything but the kitchen sink in your arrangement to keep people's attention because like you don't have a song or you don't have a lyric. I like working on arrangements and I like working on form. I like to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and that we're that we fine tune the song before we record it so that we know we've got a developed idea that we're putting forward. So I was probably a little bit nervous about that too, like not knowing what the material was going to be, like walking in. Like I knew it was going to be sort of Southern California punk rock, but I mean, that could mean a lot of things too, right? Coming from where I had come, like working up in Montreal on more budgeted productions where there was time for pre-prod or there was time for research, or at least you got a cassette with the songs on it beforehand, so you had some idea of the arrangements. Like we didn't have any of that, you know? I just kind of recall as sort of, you know, eating on the run. There weren't a lot of break times. We were moving very fast. We were working all the time, really just working all the time, because that was the only way it was going to get done. Yeah, I recall a couple of times where we might have felt like, oh man, are we going to make it, or feeling a little discouraged. But in the end, I think the humor of the songs and just like the situation itself, I think we were able to navigate it. Easy does it, but do it sort of thing. And as I recall, that was sort of the attitude, you know?
Now, I just have a technical question for you. Like, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page, which Wikipedia is Wikipedia, so I don't know if it's always accurate, right?
Right. I have one of those too.
Yeah. But here it lists you as the mixing engineer and it lists O as the producer. But didn't you do the producing for the first 3 days?
I did do the producing for the first 3 days. I was the de facto producer for those 3 days. Mixing engineer is not correct. I did do a full mix of those songs, but those are not the mixes that were used, the final mixes that were used for the record. And so that is technically inaccurate.
Is there any one memory you have working with Blink that just sticks out to you, that you just makes you laugh or you reminisce on at all?
I think just enjoying the humor of the songs.
So do you remember recording M+Ms in particular?
I do remember that tune because it's got a great title and it's just a fun, cool tune. Like that was, to me, I guess, one of those standouts from those sessions. Like I was telling you that story about like driving down Melrose and hearing it play next to me. Like I'm pretty sure that was the song, you know, that was playing. It was playing from the car, yeah. And like I said, I don't remember the exact, you know, the complete track listing, but I thought that was definitely a standout. And like clearly radio did too. Like that one got played on K-Rock, and as I was mentioning earlier, like that one still every once in a while they'll throw that one on the playlist, you know, every once in a while. So it was clearly a song that caught on with everybody. It's clearly a song that radio programmers figured was going to work.
So for me, when I hear that song, what I like is, I mean, it's a good song in general, but there's a very catchy guitar riff, you know, throughout the song at different points in time. Did you ever, when you were recording the band, did you ever like kind of like sit back and actually enjoy just listening to the music? Like, oh, this is a cool song.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I felt as we were getting them down that there was strong material there, that the guys had some really good songs and good ideas. My concern was we were struggling to get them to the finish line in a way that really presented them in their best light. But and the guys took care of that down in San Diego after we finished doing what we could do with the time we were allotted, and that's really what it came down to. No, but absolutely, I knew there were strong songs on the record. I knew that if people heard them, that they would catch on and they would have a chance to be successful. After you've made records for years and years and years, the ones that pop out, it really pops out at you. Like the hits pop out. You go, oh, that one right there. Yeah, that's going to work. That one right there. That will work,
So you had that feeling recording the band.
Yeah, totally. I felt that there was stuff there that the guys did that right off the bat I knew had strength. And that's probably why I was a little upset that we were so close on time, was because I felt like, man, we could get more out of this,
Yeah, I agree. Too bad, but it still came out great, and the fact that it's a bit raw.
Like I said, after the guys went back to San Diego and got O involved, they were able to take what we started with, put the other pieces in place that made it a success.
Were you aware that they were going to do that afterwards?
I had no idea what was going to happen, and at one point, I think I called down to Cargo to follow up, but I didn't hear anything back because I was probably trying to going, well, now that you've heard the stuff and you can see, basically where things are at, can we get another day or two to finish this record, basically, But maybe by that choice, they had already chosen to move on, or they just thought, oh, well, the budget that we spent in LA was the budget we have, so we got to figure out how to do something locally for a few $100s kind of thing,
Yeah,
which is probably what the situation was.
Yeah. So what about the Carousel? Did you remember recording that song?
Yeah, Carousel was another one that was a standout for sure. And that was like one of those ones where you're like, oh, this is super catchy. Like this one is a cool tune, And it was one of the ones that jumped out. It's kind of a girl boy song too, So it's that's always an easy sell, right? I always say there's only so many songs you can sing about haunted cars and I always like a good girl boy song.
Do you remember what the first song was you guys worked on?
I don't, and I don't remember. I think they probably just had a list and stuck it on the wall, and we just went down the list. One to the next. And because they were short songs, we could probably fit about 7-8 songs to a reel of tape before we'd have to put up another reel of tape and start again.
Yeah.
But I don't recall the order. I don't recall the track listing, actually. And if I went back and looked at it today, it would take me 10 or 15 minutes to kind of start putting the pieces back together in my head of what had happened.
When you recorded Blink those first 3 days, you were the only person in the studio with them, right?
Yeah. No, I don't even recall if anybody came by. I might have had a buddy came by to bring me some food or something.
Yeah.
That was about it.
I
think that was about it, man. I think that was about it.
Yeah. So on the physical record, does it give you a producing credit? What does it say on the record?
No, I think on the credit I'm credited as engineer. That information is probably published at Discogs. Discogs has pretty accurate breakdowns, and folks can go in and edit and update at Discogs as well, sort of like they can at Wiki. Yeah. So you might want to check the listings there and see if they differentiate in any way. I use it as a reference all the time. My credit should be engineer, and as far as, even if the band was to be nitpicky about whether I was a producer or not, it should at least be listed as a co-production, produced by Blink-182 and Steve Kravac.
If I may ask you about the actual sessions themselves, what was it like to work with the guys? How were they in the studio?
I mean, everything was going so quick that it was just sort of like, okay, do this, do that, do this, do that. Everybody hung pretty loose. I don't recall us ever, being in a position where, we were beating our heads against the wall. It was just more like, okay, look, we got a sound, we've got a setup, start tracking the stuff, Because when you're talking about trying to get that much material down, you're like, whoa, you just figure the record light's your friend. And the less time talking, the more time with the red light on is what you're hoping for.
Yeah. So I guess in that compressed time you had, there weren't really that many classic shenanigans from the guys?
Not really, I mean, there just wasn't. And as I remember, I was probably just eating on the go, sending them around the corner to grab me some food from the dollar Chinese food place and just sort of like, eating as we went and like moving from one setup to the next during overdubs. And, as I recall, it wasn't, I think there were some points there where we were sort of like looking at the scope of what we had to do and going like, whoa, like this is a lot. Like we were serious about it. But at the same time, I don't ever recall us being down about it, right? I remember us being positive about it and going, we're going to, by the end of Sunday night, we're going to have something done. I think they realized they sort of had, this was the kind of their shot with Cargo to get something going.
In general with the band, because, this was the first professional recording session they ever did and was with you, and there was this short period of time. Were they nervous at all, or were they cool the whole time?
I think a little bit of both. I think that they weren't sure how it was going to come out. So I don't doubt that they were feeling some pressure themselves. I don't recall that manifesting itself, though, in as far as people being uptight or argumentative or feeling stressed. I don't recall that at all. I actually do recall us just kind of getting the work done. And like we were talking earlier about some of the songs, like just laughing through them as we were recording them.
Yeah.
I don't recall them being under a lot of stress. And at times, I definitely think that they wanted to get it right, as they heard it in their heads. They would take time to explain, well, this part's going to sort of work like this, or this is going to happen here, like they would, have an idea. But as I say, I think just the raw energy of it and getting through it was the main guide,
Yeah, 100%. Going from Cheshire Cat to Dude Ranch, did anything strike you as in terms of their musical development, or like did it sound more like the same band you worked with?
Yes and no. Like you could tell it was the same band. You know where I heard that record probably the most was on the radio. Was not sitting down and listening to the record. I don't think I owned a copy of that record.
Which songs do you prefer more? The songs on Cheshire Cat or the songs on Dude Ranch?
I probably like the songs on Cheshire Cat because they're just absolutely moronically, sophomorically funny. And like it actually does take kind of guts to be able to write that stuff and pull it off. Like I really do like those Angry Samoans records. And I really do like those Circle Jerks records. That humor, that snide punk humor, like that Johnny Rotten always had that in his voice. Like part of that is the sound of punk rock. It's that sneer. It's that, heh, it's that, eh, And so capturing that attitude, I think it's really important. And sometimes things that are a little rawer and a little edgier, you listen back to them later and you kind of go, there's a naivete in it that is endearing and welcoming, And also, what? Like when you create a project, there is a personal attachment to it that you just can't get out. Like you end up having a relationship with those people or those creations because you went through that. And so your opinion's always going to be colored one way or another by having that experience.
So going back to Dude Ranch, you said that you don't think you owned a copy, but that you heard it a lot on the radio. Is this correct?
Yeah, it would play on the radio every day, so you'd hear it every day. And it was like definitely clear that it was a huge step up, and that they had kind of not only gotten better at their instruments, but they'd also realized that there was still room to hone the sound of the band, like what Blink-182 was. I think overall, it's like when you listen to it, for me, it's kind of split that way. You kind of hear the band that you worked with on that record before, but then you sort of hear something else, and you hear what could sort of happen after that as well. That was mixed by Don Cameron, who also worked at West Beach. And I think that they mixed that one over at Ocean Way. I think Don Cameron was a really good choice to mix that record, and that it's definitely like and you can tell it was mixed on an SSL. It's just brighter and glossier and squashier, and that really makes a difference. That makes a huge difference. I think those Dude Ranch mixes sound really good, and I think it was a great growth record for Blink-182. From going from where they had been to where they were going, they had to make that record. I think I dropped by the sessions. I don't think the band was there. I think Don was just there getting a mix worked up. I had to drop off some reels or piece of gear to him or something like that. So I knew that it was going on, but like at this point I was like so deep in other projects. It was like, well, great, have a great day. I'm heading back to do whatever I'm doing up the road, you know? At that point I was working 7 days a week making records for months at a time. I'd sometimes work 2 or 3 months without a day off. You know, it's just, that's it. But that's how busy we were then, and that's how much business there was then, and that's how many records we were selling then in the 90s. You know, it was a decent business to be in before everything was turned to dust.
How did your relationship with Blink-182 begin? How did that all start?
I had just moved to LA and started working at West Beach Recorders, and that was the first job I had taken after coming down from Canada. So basically this opportunity came up where I could make a move, start engineering at this studio, and start working with bands that were coming in there. And it was like all sorts of really cool bands were recording there. The Offspring had just done the demos for Smash there. NoFX was just scheduled to do Punk and Drublic there, which ended up like going gold and being a huge, huge record. And so I saw this place as a great opportunity to go to work. So I started looking through the book, and in this book, it had the upcoming bookings, and there was a booking for a band called Blink, you know, a couple of weeks down the road. And so that was the first I had ever heard of them or seen anything, you know, on paper about them. And that's how I found out about the band. It wasn't Blink-182 at the time. It was just Blink.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'd never heard of these guys. But underneath it was written booking Cargo Records. And I knew Cargo Records because Cargo Records actually started in Montreal. And a friend of mine, Randy Boyd, was running that distributorship. And so they were distributing records to companies, but they also started signing some bands and putting out records for some bands. Part of that company, one of the investors in the company moved Cargo to San Diego, set up shop there, started distributing records in Southern California and in the States, and started signing bands. And one of the bands he signed was Blink. So how weird is that, right? Like, that you've sort of been working with this guy on and off, producing records for their company, their label, and their distributorship. You come to California, and all of a sudden, he's got one of his bands that he's just signed in the studio, and they're coming into your studio.
Wow, yeah, that's a cool little story.
Oh, it was kind of like random, but pretty odd. So I sort of had a good feeling about it. So they were booked for 3-day sessions, 3 one-day sessions. I'll just jump like into that because
go for it, man.
We're sort of there. When I met them was just literally when they finally showed up for the recording sessions proper, and I didn't have any inkling of who they were or what they looked like at that time. I just knew 3 guys were coming from San Diego, and it was on Cargo Records, and I knew Cargo because Cargo had started in Montreal. You know, Cargo will be paying their bills, and the band will probably be pretty good and know what they're doing, and so this should be a fun weekend, you know. And that's what I sort of was thinking going into it. I'd been running my own studio in a loft in Montreal for a little while. So, I mean, I knew the basics of the business, from booking a studio and getting people in, and, you know, just more of the business aspects of the business as well, the recording business, as opposed to just hard recording, you know. Coming from where I had come, like working up in Montreal on more budgeted productions, where there was time for pre-prod, or there was time for research, or at least you got a cassette with the songs on it beforehand, so you had some idea of the arrangements. Like, we didn't have any of that, you know. I just kind of recall us sort of, you know, eating on the run. There weren't a lot of break times. We were moving very fast. We were working all the time, really just working all the time, because that was the only way it was going to get done.
So in terms of the actual studio where you guys recorded the record, West Beach Recorders, how did you end up working there?
Some buddies of mine happened to be recording at West Beach, and they said, oh, well, you need an engineer. Check out this guy. Here's his resume. He left it here the other day. So that started a phone call where I sent them a demo reel and got a job offer to move down. And so when I moved down, I sort of had to take over the business. And the studio owner basically just gave me the keys and the calendar and said, here's what's going on. And so I got to leave town, and good luck.
How old were you at this time?
I was 30 at the time.
That's been a bit of a whirlwind. You just show up and all of a sudden you're just...
No, it totally was, you know. And so I just started going through entries in the calendar, you know, week after week. And there weren't that many bookings, but there was this booking, like, you know, 2 or 3 weeks down the road, and it was this band, Blink.
In that few-week period leading up to the Blink session, who else did you record?
I sort of look at this calendar and I'm like, okay, well, there's a band coming in next weekend, this band Guttermouth, right? And I'm like, I'd heard about Guttermouth. I knew about this band, but I hadn't listened to anything from them. So I kind of got started the next weekend working on their project. And of course it was just amazing. And they were super funny, like real sort of angry Samoans, circle jerks, kind of real send-up sense of humor in their music, so that was perfect for me. I love it when we don't take ourselves that seriously. And so I jumped in, started working with them, and then I just started going through entries in the calendar, week after week, and there weren't that many bookings, but there was this booking 2 or 3 weeks down the road, and it was this band Blink.
Now, you mentioned that the Blink session was tight for time and that the guys may have been a bit nervous about this being their first professional recording session. But at the same time, you also mentioned that you guys tried to stay positive throughout the entire experience. So given those mixed feelings about the situation, in general, what was the atmosphere like during the sessions?
I do remember there being us being kind of jovial off the top, I always like to keep it light. It's good to project, that you're easygoing, and that you want to be helpful. Get people comfortable. I think that was probably, the tone for all of us because we realized we had a lot to get through. It's just let's keep it positive, guys. Let's get through this. We can do this,
So you mentioned that in the early 90s, that was in general, that was a good time to make records. And now, obviously, the internet's completely flipped the business on its head. How do you deal with that? How do you work day to day now that it's so different?
Well, I'm more diversified now. Right? Everybody's got a laptop, so everybody's a record producer now. And if you're going to sit around and wait for people to send you records to record or mix, it's just not going to happen these days. You've got to hustle and get work where you can, or you have to have work from other, past clients. Other than that, it's diversify. Now, in the 90s when the business was, going bonkers, I made records. That's all I did. And I did it, like I said, I did it 7 days a week, sometimes 30 days a month, 60 days, 90 days in a row. I do solely, production business back then, but now I have to be diversified. I have my studio, and that part of my business does run, and I do my own stuff in that as well. But I also run an independent record label called Porterhouse Records, and I do a lot of work on reissuing catalog and vinyl and stuff like that. So that helps keep the lights on. And I still now actually do a little bit of live engineering work. Every once in a while, I'll do a little bit of live sound for bands here and there. Example, last summer, I did a tour with Modern English in the States for a couple of months. So between all of those things, I'm able to still be in music every day. But yeah, if I was only producing records at this point, that business just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. So, what would your advice be to a young producer now who's trying to break into the business?
Good luck. I don't have any advice for anybody. I really don't. If you want to do it, that's my advice is if you want to do it, do it. And if you don't. And that's basically it. The business that I grew up in is not the business that we have now. It's completely different. I've managed to reinvent myself, so I'm still part of it because I love this business and I have this relationship with music that is really, really important to me. Through that, I've realized that I have to wear different hats and can't expect that things are going to be like they were in 1984 or 1994 or 2004. I worry about some people that are going through audio engineering schools and stuff like that. Listen, they're all great skills. Education's wonderful. But I just don't know how much work is out there for that now. Vancouver's probably got 3 or 4 operational recording studios that are public now. LA used to have 60. It's probably got 16 to 20 now. One by one, they've just all disappeared. The buildings are being converted into residences, I want to talk about the pendulum swinging, I'm thinking about a room that I made a great bunch of records in LA, Grandmaster Recorders, where they did The Color and the Shape, and they did the first No Doubt record, and I did a Cool Less Than Jake record there. And that place was gutted, and they've turned it into a restaurant, which is now closed because of COVID. So here's this incredible piece of history gone. Mushroom Studios in Vancouver, with its natural echo chambers built right into the building. It's a one-of-a-kind structure. And, they tried to make it run after the fact. But, that city can only support a couple of large recording facilities. That's it. Like, the business just isn't there anymore. It's not just me that are producers or engineers. It's the actual studio owners themselves, the people that have built these facilities and maintained these facilities for 30, 40, 50 years. And one by one, they've just all gone by the wayside too, Yeah.
I guess, I was speaking with Steve Albini a couple months back, and he was saying the one positive from all this is at least it gives the individual the onus to, if you have a laptop, you can just do it. You don't have to go through the system of the studios, etc.
Oh, for sure. The system's far more egalitarian now, right? Anybody can make a record, and I think there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in anybody being able to make their own film, to publish their own book.
Yeah.
But look what blogging has done for writing. That's been a really positive outcropping of new media. I'm an independent label owner. I deal with blogs and independent press all the time, and music press all the time. It's a big part of what I do, maintaining relationships with these publications that write about the music that we do and the films that we make and the television shows we create. We're lucky that we have that supporting us and kind of tied into the model. It's one big positive.
Yeah, it's just a different. It's like you said, it's just a different model now. You have to kind of adapt to it.
Yeah, it's a different. If it's a different way of trying to monetize it, because trying to monetize music right now is so hard. The main way you monetize music right now is not spend any money making it.
Yeah.
I'm telling you this as a label owner. I'm dealing with an artist right now. And we're like, oh, well, let's launch this single. What should we do? Oh, we should do X, Y, Z. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do it in-house. You and I are going to figure it out. And that's cool, right? There's power in that. And there's self-determination in that. And who's going to support you more than yourself? If you can't get down and believe in yourself and believe you can make something happen, why is anybody else going to get in line and buy into it?
Very, very true point. Very true point. People can love you and support you, but you have to eventually support yourself.
You got to figure out how to do it. At the end of the day, clock runs out. You still got to turn something in, so figure it out.
Yeah, the past few years for me is now that really I've begrudgingly accepted that the internet's completely changed the business. I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I succeed now in the internet era, even though I don't like the internet that much? You kind of have to adapt.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I have to get onto the three major social platforms every morning for my label, see if anybody said anything or played a song or stuff that I've got to retweet, I probably spend 45 minutes to an hour on social media a day just getting today's message out. But it's part of that platform that you've got to respect if you want to be relevant, not only to yourself as your business, but your artists on your label, right? You have a responsibility to them.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you see, make sure to subscribe for more. All the videos on this channel are original. I'm the one conducting all the interviews and editing all the videos together. So if you guys like what you see and you want to support, the best way to do so is honestly just to subscribe. Lots more to come.